Have you ever had that feeling that you were being watched from the dark? We all know the standard monsters, the ones under the bed, the ones in the closet. But what happens when the monster doesn't hide? What happens when it stands right in front of your headlights, staring back at you with glowing red eyes? Today, we're traveling back to 1966, to a small, quiet, blue-collar town called Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A town that for 13 terrifying months became the epicenter of one of the most chilling and well-documented paranormal events in modern history. This isn't just a ghost story. This is a story of mass panic, bizarre phenomena, and a catastrophic tragedy that would leave 46 people dead. This is the story of the Mothman. Our story actually begins a few days before the famous sightings. It was November 12th, 1966, in a town called Clendenin, just a short drive from Point Pleasant. 5 men were working late in a cemetery, digging a grave. As they worked in the cold autumn air, something caught their attention. Lifting off from the nearby trees, flying directly over their heads, was what they described as a brown human being. It wasn't a bird, it wasn't a plane, it was a man, but it was flying. The gravediggers were terrified, but they kept quiet. Who would believe them anyway? But 3 days later, the whole world would know. It was the night of November 15th. 2 young married couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Millette, were out for a drive. They were cruising around an area known to the locals as the TNT area. To understand this story, you have to understand the TNT area. It was an abandoned World War II munitions plant. It sat on thousands of acres of dense woods, dotted with massive concrete dome-shaped bunkers called igloos. During the war, these bunkers held high explosives. But by 1966, it was just an empty, dark, and creepy wasteland. The perfect place for teenagers to hang out. Around 11:30 at night, Roger was driving his black '57 Chevy through the winding dirt roads of the TNT area. Suddenly, the headlights hit something near an old generator plant. The car slammed to a halt. Standing there in the darkness was a creature. It was shaped like a man, but it was massive, at least 6.5 to 7 feet tall. It was grayish-brown. But the most terrifying thing, the thing that would haunt these 4 people for the rest of their lives, were its eyes. They were huge, glowing, hypnotic red eyes, set near the shoulders of the creature, as if it didn't even have a head. For a second, nobody breathed. Then, the creature unfurled a pair of massive wings, wings that spanned at least 10 feet across. Roger slammed the car into reverse, spun the tires, and hit the gas. They sped out of the TNT area, flying down Route 62 in a pure, blind panic. They hit speeds of over 100 miles per hour. But as they looked out the windows, the nightmare wasn't over. The creature was keeping pace with the car. It wasn't flapping its wings. It was just gliding, effortlessly, gliding right above the vehicle, keeping up with the car going 100 miles an hour. It followed them all the way to the city limits before suddenly veering off into the night sky. Trembling, crying, and completely terrified, the 2 couples drove straight to the Mason County Courthouse and burst into the sheriff's office. Deputy Millard Halstead was on duty. He knew these kids. He knew they weren't troublemakers. Seeing the sheer terror on their faces, he knew they had seen something out there. Halstead drove out to the TNT area that very night. He didn't find the creature, but he did report that his police radio started emitting bizarre, garbled, high-pitched sounds as he drove past the abandoned bunkers. The next morning, the local newspaper, the Point Pleasant Register, ran the headline, "Couples see man-sized bird, creature, something." A copy editor at another paper, realizing the creature needed a catchy name, looked to the popular Batman television show of the era. He dubbed the creature the Mothman. The town exploded. Overnight, Point Pleasant became a circus. Armed hunters flooded the TNT area hoping to bag a monster. Reporters swarmed the streets. But this wasn't an isolated incident. The sightings had just begun. Just one day later, on November 16th, Marcella Bennett was driving to visit friends who lived near the TNT area. As she got out of her car, holding her baby daughter, she noticed something moving in the shadows. Slowly, a figure rose up from behind a parked car. It was large, gray, and had those exact same glowing red eyes. Marcella was so terrified she dropped her baby in shock. She quickly recovered, grabbed her child, and ran into the house. The creature followed them to the porch, staring through the windows for several agonizing minutes before disappearing into the night. Over the next year, the sightings kept coming. Over 100 people claimed to have seen the creature, and these weren't crazy people. These were firemen, businessmen, teachers, and police officers. But the Mothman wasn't the only strange thing happening in Point Pleasant. As 1967 rolled in, the atmosphere in Point Pleasant descended into an atmosphere of high strangeness. People reported seeing strange lights in the sky, massive glowing spheres hovering silently over the Ohio River. Telephones would ring in the middle of the night, emitting strange electronic beeping sounds. Poltergeist activity was reported in homes near the TNT area. And then came the Men in Black. Witnesses who saw the Mothman or UFOs reported being visited by strange men in immaculate dark suits. They drove pristine, vintage black cars. They looked almost human, but not quite right. Their skin was too pale, their movements were stiff, and they warned witnesses in monotonous, robotic voices to stop talking about what they had seen. Journalist and author John Keel arrived in Point Pleasant to investigate the phenomena. He compiled hundreds of reports. He began to believe that the Mothman wasn't an animal or even an alien. He believed it was something dimensional, something beyond our understanding. And more importantly, he began to believe it was a warning. As the winter of 1967 approached, the atmosphere in Point Pleasant grew incredibly heavy. Witnesses reported having terrifying nightmares of a disaster, dreams of people drowning, dreams of wrapped Christmas presents floating in dark, freezing water. Something terrible was coming. December 15th, 1967. It was a Friday, exactly 13 months to the day since the Mothman was first seen. The Silver Bridge, an I-bar chain suspension bridge, connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio. At 5 p.m., the bridge was packed with rush-hour traffic. Families were crossing the river to do their Christmas shopping. Bumper-to-bumper cars idled on the suspended roadway. Down below, the Ohio River ran dark and freezing cold. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoed through the valley. It sounded like a massive gunshot. A single suspension bearing deep within the structure of the bridge failed. Due to a microscopic manufacturing flaw, the metal had cracked, and in a matter of seconds, a chain reaction began. Drivers felt the bridge sway violently. Then, the entire structure, tons of steel and concrete, collapsed into the icy waters of the Ohio River below. It didn't fall slowly. It snapped.
Within 30 seconds, the entire Silver Bridge plunged into the freezing depths of the Ohio River below. Dozens of cars filled with men, women, and children were thrown into the freezing depths. The darkness, the cold, and the sheer weight of the debris made it impossible to escape. 46 people lost their lives that evening. It remains the deadliest bridge collapse in modern United States history. 2 of the victims were never found. In the aftermath of the horrific tragedy, the town of Point Pleasant was shattered. The nation mourned. Investigations were launched. Engineers concluded that poor maintenance and a tiny, undetectable flaw in the steel caused the collapse. It was a terrible mechanical failure. But the locals couldn't help but notice something else.